Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 354 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our third book is called From Letters to Leaders, Leveraging Your Fraternity or Sorority Experience to Land Your Dream Job. So go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, I know so many fraternity members are all over the country that are into investing and finding the next big stock to hit it big. Instead of gambling on what might or might not be the next Apple computers, I want to find someone that was disciplined and an expert inventor to shed some light on what many of our listeners might find intimidating, which is Wall Street. So that brings us to our next guest. Ron is the author of The Moses of Wall Street, and he's the founder of the Triple Tank System, the only investing system created from a biblical truth, known to his friends and clients simply as Tank. He also teaches new and experienced investors on how to eliminate risk and maximize returns in the stock market to become bulletproof investors. As a Sunday school teacher and an expert investor, Ron Tank offers an extremely unique combination of field-proven strategy, real-life tested biblical advice, and a proven system that investors need to be successful in today's financial markets. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today and kind of demystifying some of these stocks and Wall Street and everything else that's out there. I know that people think that it's a good tool to invest in, and it certainly can be for the trained eye. And so I want to get to the bottom of it. But before we get to all of that, I know you decided on Ohio University for your undergraduate experience. So why did you choose Ohio U?
Wasn't rocket science, I can tell you that, Michael. But I tell you, I had an uncle that my dad had two brothers, and one of them, out of the three, went to college. He was the only one, and he happened to go to Ohio University. That was one of the reasons. So my dad was kind of familiar with the school. It wasn't too far from home, probably within an hour and a half to 2 hours drive, which I liked because I was a homeboy at the time. And I wanted to be able to come home on the weekends and whatnot. So, boy, it's close. My dad said, "Hey, your uncle went there. Let's go check it out." We went down, and I was like, "Yeah, Dad, but can I even get in there?" He was like, "Well, you got to apply. You're going to have to try." And I visited the school. I liked it. I said, "Hey, it's close to home." And that was about all there was to it, Michael. And they let me in. So I went.
It's a good thing they let you in. I mean, what would you have done if they didn't let you in?
I have no idea. My life would have been totally different. I can tell you that for sure. For certain. It would have been different.
Yeah. Well, listen, obviously it worked out for you. So everything was fine in the end.
Love the school too.
Yeah, it's a great school. It certainly is. Some great students there. What's interesting about you is you originally had a job as a computer systems manager. Your younger brother, Dave, he had a job selling mutual funds. So what made you all of a sudden decide that you're going to quit your jobs and go into investing full time in 1995?
Boy, a lot of things went into it, Michael. My brother, his job got basically canceled. I mean, there was a group of them. The company let all of them go. He was like, I think I want to do this investing full time. We talked about it. So he left when that was over, he just started investing full time. Me and him worked at it together for a while, and I was a computer programmer, and I kept talking to him, and he was at home working on this stuff. And I was feeling kind of jealous myself. I was like, wow, he's at home, he's working, he's going to get paid what he's worth. And that was one of the things that made us do it, Michael, was we were like, I worked as a computer programmer, and I thought, I know what I'm going to get paid every day. I can work as hard as I want. My pay's probably not going to change too much. And the market just seemed fascinating to me, Michael. I had a sub in college that taught for 3 weeks. He made us study stocks. It had nothing to do with the class. It was a small business class. Professor left. We took 3 weeks, studied it. My brother, once he started, I was like, wow, wouldn't that be just a great thing? It seemed like that'd be a great way to learn how to make your money go to work for you. My dad asked me, he said, "Ron, who cares more about your money than you do?" course, at the time I was in college, I didn't have much money. I was in debt actually at the time, but I thought, boy, if I had some money, it seems like Dad's got a point there. Who cares more about it than I do? Maybe I should learn how to do it. We finally decided, to do it. I really, Michael, one day in my truck, I kind of got the approval from God. I really felt like he was giving me the okay. I was a little scared about leaving a college degree behind and going out and not really knowing, am I going to be able to do this for certain? There was no certainty to it. So it took a little bit of guts. I got God's approval. Me and my brother said, boy, if we could both do it full time, we could do this really well because we'd have more time to commit to it. And one of the ingredients that was needed, Michael, was passion. And we both had it in spades. And so that passion kind of pushed us that way. I kind of got the approval one day from God. I said, yep, that's good. Me and my wife talked about it. We sat down and had a little powwow session one day about it, and talked about our expenses. And she was working, I wasn't. Had she not been working, could we have done it? That would have been really hard to do. But we talked about it, and we thought, we looks like we can barely make it if we cut out some Christmas spending and birthday spending and going out to dinner spending, and we're gonna have to tighten the ship down to be able to pay our bills. But we did it. It took several years to pay off, Michael. The education part I did not have. I mean, I had a basic foundation to work off of, but I was by no means a seasoned pro at that point in time. So I just knew I was willing to learn, and me and my brother had the passion. Said, what better time in our life to do it? Better now than 10 years from now. Let's do it. And off we went.
That passion, that's exactly, I think you hit the nail on the head. You got to be passionate about what you're doing if you want to really make it big and successful in whatever it is that you choose to do in life. If you don't have that passion, you got to find something else. You got to do something that you're really passionate about. Forget about the money. It's just, if you really want to make it, you need to be thinking about this just day and night and weekends and all of that. It's got to really consume you in a sense.
Yeah, and you know what I found out, Michael? I've heard this saying. I don't know if you've heard it. That I don't even remember where it came from, but a guy said, "If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life."
Yeah.
And I really never understood that too much. I thought, well, that sounds good, but what if you love something and it doesn't pay you? Then you think, well, I'll work forever. And so, but when it can pay you, boy, it's true. And if you have the passion for it, man, you've got. I think you have 3/4 of the battle whipped.
Yeah,
if you have that passion for it.
I agree with you completely. And then a few years later, in 1999, at the age of 33, suddenly you turn $40,000 into $1.4 million in profit in the stock market, which is a 460% gain. During the same time, the NASDAQ composite gained a total of about 57%. And you were suddenly featured in Investors Business Daily on your success. Now, how in the world, tell our audience, how did you know which stocks to buy?
Well, boy, I tell you, there's where the crux of the matter is really, Michael, when you get down to it. Most people buy something because one of two reasons. They either like the product or the company for some reason, but that doesn't mean it's a good stock to own at the time. Right. Or they decide they want to find something that looks cheap, and eventually everybody will discover that it's going to be worth something, and they want to be in early. And what I've learned is, I learned from a guy by the name of William O'Neill. So he's got a couple of good books. I recommend him in mine. And that's how I started. And one of the things he teaches you is that you need to study previous leaders. So it kind of makes sense, really, right? If you're going to be an engineer, you're going to college, study what previous engineers have learned to be true about engineering. So I said, hey, this guy's done really well, I think. And we kind of stumbled onto him by fate there, I think. But about 4 years or 5 prior to us actually quitting our job. So we had some time and had studied, but he teaches basically there is a formula that leaders out in the marketplace, there'll be certain things about them that'll be true at the time you need to be thinking about buying those. And a lot of it has to do with earnings, obviously. So any guy that's studied Peter Lynch or Warren Buffett, you're always looking for who's making the money. So you got to look for earnings. And so we learned, hey, earnings are important. You need to look for a new product or service. The industry group that they're part of is important. But most importantly is you have to know which direction the market's going. And I kind of compare it, Michael, to being out in a boat fishing, on the ocean and you're 20 miles out into the ocean and you're looking to the north and you're sitting there fishing on your boat and you're catching fish and you're figuring this out, having fun, enjoying being there. But you forget to look over your shoulder to the south, which could have a hurricane coming your way. And who wants to be out there in that? And most people don't realize you have to be able to figure out what the market's doing and the direction it's going. And it's not guesswork. The pros will say, well, you can't understand it, but it is about supply and demand. And you can learn to know whether the market's healthy and trending up and or unhealthy and going down. So we learned that was foremost, that you have to know it, and then go find these certain traits of past leaders in current stocks that you can look at right now, and you can figure out which ones are good. And then it comes down to timing, which means you have to be able to use a chart. I kind of compare it to a doctor using an x-ray or a builder using a blueprint. You have to be able to look at something and tell what is it that I'm looking at, and a stock chart will tell you that. So it tells you the supply and demand equation of who's buying and who's selling. So it was a matter of learning how to do that. It took us, that big money though, Michael, that came after. So I started maybe in 1990, 91 and worked $3,000 up to about 25 in a few years without adding money to it. Then added a little bit of money and went to about 40, and then started in 1998 with that 40 and went from there to that big number, those big results. So it took me, 5 or 6 years to really get a feel and an understanding of what you need to do to be able to find these leaders and get in them at the right time. So it's kind of, I compare it to going to college, Michael. I say, hey, if you're going to be an engineer and you're going to college, could you be an engineer and not go to college? Well, good luck, finding that guy will take you under his wing and teach you everything and hope you can understand math and physics and CAD drawings and all that stuff. And school says, hey, if I go to college for 4 years, these people will give me the education, the basic groundwork that now an employer can pull me in because he knows, hey, that guy got straight A's, man. He's a whiz at math, physics. He understands the concepts. He probably doesn't know how to go build a Corvette or something, but we can put him to work and he understands the basics, and we can teach him what he doesn't know about this right now. We know he has the ability to learn and he has the basics. And if you have the passion to go build a Corvette and design one, that guy will put you to work and you'll figure it out with his. And I think it's really important to have somebody you're learning from that's willing to take you under the wing. They cut years off your learning curve, years. I think years, Michael. And if I could go back and meet myself in college at OU, man, I'm telling you, if I knew what I know now back then, it would be worth more than my college degree to me by a long shot.
Yeah. See, that mentorship, that's really the key to all of this. I feel like so many of the new investors that I see in college today, they're really just gamblers. So, how do we prevent gambling in the stock market?
Well, that's a big key. Like when somebody says, well, how do I keep from gambling? I look at gambling as, hey, you don't own anything when you gamble. Really, when you go to a horse race or horse track, you don't own anything. You give somebody money, you don't own anything. You're just hoping that the horse wins. In the end, you probably don't own anything, and you probably don't have anything either. You probably have nothing when it's over. And so one of the ways that I learned that how do you prevent gambling in the market is to have a system. I like to have a proven system, kind of like a guy building a Corvette. It'd be nice to have an engineering degree, but it'd also be nice to have a system that I can follow to know that when I get to the end, I can go produce that Corvette that I see that I've designed. So I say, well, when it comes to gambling, how do you prevent it? Have a proven system. You got to have a set of rules, guidelines. What am I looking for? How do I get in? How do I get out? What's my guide? How's the market? Have I learned all the parts and pieces? And then am I willing to actually put that into practice? And there's where the rubber meets the road. Michael, can I take something and put it into practice? I might have rules and guidelines, but will I follow them? And most people, what they don't realize is, even though I've got the education now, and maybe I've got a guy that wants me to help, he'll help me learn. It's, will I listen and do what I need to do? Or am I smarter than the market? And what I find is people turn into gamblers when they start losing. They say, well, it'll come back. And all of them, I can say this for certain, Michael, every investor that's survived the markets and has been able to do it for his lifetime and has done well, he has a loss cutting rule that he follows and he never breaks it. And even guys that have, I know some that were really smart and they broke that rule and they got on the wrong track and it wrecked them totally just because they started violating that one rule. So the rules keep you from gambling. They'll also do other things. They'll keep you from being greedy and you'll say, well, I'm starting to get scared. Well, you don't have anything to scared about as long as you have some rules to follow, and you'll use them.
Yeah.
Keep using them.
I like that. Systems, guardrails that are in place. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. But you said something interesting too, which is knowing when to get out. And you seem to excel at selling stocks at the top of the market. So how do you know when it's time to sell?
Again, that's studying rules, Michael. I mean, O'Neill's book, and most of my rules, I don't know that you could ever figure any more rules out than he has in his book. I think he has about 26 different things to look for. And one of the ways I was able to make that big return back there in 2000, and we had about a year and a half that was up and about a year and a half that was down. So that 1998 to the end of 2000 was a big up and followed by a big down. Mm-hmm. But by the time we were down at the end of 2000, the markets were still up. So, but he has sell rules, and that's part of it. And we recognized in 1999 that the markets were heading into what we looked at as a climax run. O'Neill talks about those in stocks occurring and how to identify them. So sometimes people go, oh man, I'm making money so fast. This is so great. And what tends to happen to people is they get greedy right there. And so when everything's going, they think, oh, I can't believe how much I'm making, how fast this is working in a period of a month or two. And you think, this is wonderful. And you start thinking, man, I can't, but boy, if it keeps going, I could really do well. And you start getting greedy. You start liking the fact that this money's coming to you and you're not doing anything, just letting it happen. But what they don't recognize often is that those can end on the way up. And once they do, they tend to stay down for a long period of time. And a lot of leaders talked back in 2000 and never came back. GE being one of them, never came back. So there's a danger in not having these sell rules. And so knowing when it's time to go is, again, based on a set of rules. You just say, if I see this, then it's telling me this, maybe it's the party's about to be over and I need to recognize it. I don't want to be the guy left cleaning up the mess. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So your book is called The Moses of Wall Street. And in there, you talk about the 10 commandments of the successful investor. So these are some rules that you're talking about. Give us an example of some of these key commandments that you're talking about.
Well, and I think three, you mentioned, these 10 commandments, and I'm thinking, out of the 10, I looked through them the other day. Mm-hmm. I tend to review them every once in a while just to see if I'm off track anywhere, because you can get off track. And I looked at them and I thought, boy, if I had to pick what's the most important out of those 10, boy, it was tough, because I looked down and said, boy, that's important. How do I pick one of those and say it's most important? But for me, Michael, the most important thing has been the number one, which is putting God first. And I've realized that the Bible, I look at it as my owner's manual. A little bit, it tells me how I should be acting and thinking. If something's not working and I'm broken, it probably is going to give me some good guidance on how to fix that. Has a lot to talk about when it comes to fear and greed and pride. Those are the big three killers in the stock market. If I had to pick three, it's fear, greed, and pride, or pride of opinion, you might call that one. So I think that's number one, is keeping God first. Keeping myself well grounded there has big benefits, not only in the market, but just in life in general. So I love that as the first place to go. If I had to follow it up with a couple, maybe top three, I'd say, hey, number two is, if I'm going to be in the market, I better have a proven system. Mm-hmm. Without that, I don't stand much of a chance. So I'd say that comes right up there high as number two. Number three probably would be that loss cutting I mentioned to you, which is, because if I can do that correctly, a couple of things will happen with that rule, Michael. That's so valuable, because it'll tell you, if you start cutting losses and keeping them small, if you have too many of them in a row, or over a short period of time, you're probably doing something wrong.
Mm.
Or you're fighting the markets in general. But it's kind of a red flag if you get very many of them to say, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. I'm getting all these losses. I'm trying to protect myself, because you got to protect your capital. Without your money in the market, you don't have a tool. And it really is just a tool. It is a tool. It's nothing else. It's a tool. And if you don't protect that tool, and pretty soon you don't have a tool, you're out of business. Right. So you have to protect it. I'd say those are the top three. Like, if I had to pick them, I mean, I really looked at the others and said, boy, I hate to throw that out. But I mean, if I had to pick them, that's where I'd be on the top three.
Yeah, I can tell you're very disciplined, which is, I think, what makes you successful. I think that's excellent. Now, there are some money myths that are out there that could potentially stop me from achieving financial independence. Give us an example of some of these money myths.
Well, I'll give you, I wrote down three things on money myths, but probably, I don't know which one would be most important, but I think the one might be the most harmful is a myth out there, is that you'll hear people say, well, you get into the market that you're just being greedy and focused on the money, you start going down that road. And I say, a lot of people you'll hear say, money is the root of all evil. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that. I've heard people in church say that. I've heard other people say, but that's not true. So, and you say, what do you mean, Tank? It's not true. Money's the root of it. It sounds like it ought to be true. I mean, if a guy's just greedy and focused about money, then money is the root of all evil. But the Bible actually says it's the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil. And so it's the love of money. And you say, well, does that make sense? Well, sure, because you could be a poor person and start to fall in love with money and go rob a bank to get it. Mm-hmm. All sorts of problems stem from loving money. Doesn't mean that you have to have money to love money. It doesn't mean you can't be broke and fall in love with money. So if money's a sole motivator, and my way I look at, Michael, my life is, if money becomes more important than God to me, I'm off track.
You're off track.
I'm off track. And that's one of them. My dad used to say, hey, bud, money doesn't grow on trees. And he's right. And he'll say, and I used to hear, it takes money to make money. And I don't believe, I started with $3,000. So is that a bunch of money? People say, oh, he's filthy rich, like having money is some bad thing. There's that, stigma around somebody that has money, that they're somehow dirty or filthy. And you can get that in your head, and your subconscious will say, well, money's not good. It's the root of evil. It's that guy's filthy rich. Well, why is he described as filthy rich, not good rich? So it's an outlook. And, I think there's sometimes too much money. People will believe, I've seen this, Michael, people think, hey, he has too much money. Well, what is too much? What I know is the Bible says that to whom much is given, much is expected. And so what is much? Well, that's all subjective. So don't worry about how much money you have or don't have. Focus on being a good steward of the money you do have. And if you are a good steward, you'll have more of it over time. But so there's some money myths that I see bounce around in people's heads a little bit that influence them anyway.
Yeah, that is interesting. That saying "filthy rich." Like, where did that come from? Filthy rich? That's good rich. There's nothing filthy about it.
Yeah, why does that make it filthy? Why is the guy filthy?
People always ask me, when am I going to retire? And at some point, I suppose I'm going to have to retire. But, I don't play golf, so I don't know what I would do. I need something that's going to consume my time. I do love public speaking. I love working with college students. So I want to continue to do that as long as humanly possible. But you talk about ways where you can prevent that one mistake that could postpone retirement for maybe 5, 10, or even more, right? So how can I prevent that one mistake that's going to postpone my retirement?
Well, I'll tell you, and it's a tough one, Michael. I'll give you a real story. So I own a piece of property. I had a guy from the electric company come out to look at putting in some wiring for me, or changing some poles and wiring. And he come out, we asked me how I ended up buying this place. And I told him how I got it. I got involved with the stock market when I was younger and did pretty well, and took money to buy some of that money to buy that place. And anyway, he said, oh, stock market. Oh, man. And I could tell right off the bat, this is bad topic with him. And he said, oh, Ron, that stock market, He said, I used to like it. Now I hate it. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, because I was going to retire. And he was an older fellow. And I said, well, why are you not going to retire now? And he said, oh, I'll probably retire, but I'm probably going to be working for another 5 to 10 years, a lot longer than I wanted to. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, you know, that big bear market we had in 2000. And of course, when I was talking to him, this was probably 2011, right in there. And he said, you remember that? Oh, I said, oh, yeah, I remember that market. And he said, well, I rode that. My account went way down during that time and I didn't do anything. And then the market recovered in 03 and back up until 07, 08. Then we ran into the banking problem and down we went hard again. So we had 2 historical bad things happen. Usually you don't get 2 like that close together. But we did. And he sat through the decline in 2008 again, but he couldn't take it after he watched, I think he said about 50% of his money was gone, and he saw it happen to him once. It happened to him in 2000 to 03, and he did it to him again. And he said, Ron, I just couldn't take it. You know, I did not like the fact that how much could I lose with my retirement? And I could be working forever and never retire. And he just knew, hey, if I get out of there now, I can at least work another 5 or 10 years. At least I'll know where I'm at. I can retire. So he just sold out. He never come back in. So he's missed everything that could have helped him recover. So you'd say, well, what's the mistake you can make when you're reaching a retirement age and you're in the stock market and you don't know how to identify that the market's exhibiting signs of a top that could be real troublesome, and you think you're going to sit through it? You'll try to do that, but you probably won't make it. You'll probably end up selling out somewhere to preserve yourself like he did. And then you're stuck with whatever you have, and you can't get yourself to get back in because you don't feel like you have the time to ride or to sit and hope that things get better. And if they don't, you're stuck.
Yeah.
And so the psychology of an older person, you know, if you're at 60, 65 and you're thinking retirement, you've got to learn how to identify a potential bear market coming and being able to sidestep that and not get greedy. You know, that's hard to do because you say, well, if I stay just another 2-3 years, maybe this goes way up and I can even quit earlier. I'll have more to quit. I'll go buy a big home in Florida somewhere, whatever it is. So that you really got to know where you're at. And that's where it would pay to have a professional guy or yourself trained well enough so that you recognize, do I need to go right now or don't I? I might be 5 years from retirement, but this next 5 years, if this gets worse than I think, could just totally change my future, and it isn't worth the risk at that point. So, you know, it might be better to go.
You make some great points. I really like that. And, you know, I also love the fact that you're an adult Sunday school teacher for almost 14 years. Talk to our audience a little bit about what's been the most meaningful part of that particular job over the years.
Yeah, boy, I tell you, don't ever tell God you won't do something, Michael. I said in a Sunday school class, you know, before I became a teacher, I remember sitting in the back of this guy's class and I said, boy, there's just no, I admired my teacher, but I thought, man, that's pretty tough. You got to know the Bible pretty well, and you got to be prepared every Sunday. That's a big commitment, you know. And I thought, well, I would never want to do that. I just remember telling that under breath, and it wasn't too many years later, there it was. But the most meaningful thing, probably, Michael, was a lot of things benefit. When I think of that, there was a gal in my class, probably it's probably been 5, 6, 7 years ago, actually wrote me a letter and thanked me for being a Sunday school teacher. I kept that letter. I treasure that letter because I know I made an impact on her life, and she told me so. And I thought, wow, here I never thought I'd ever teach Sunday school. And now I have somebody tell me I made a huge impact on her life, and she shared a whole 2-page letter with me of all this stuff, and I treasure that. The other thing that's been the biggest benefit of that is it's helped keep me well grounded. And in my job that I have, keeping that mindset and the greed and the fear and the pride and all that stuff at bay, I have no choice. If you're teaching Sunday school class and you're studying about, you're going to run into these things all the time that talk about how you shouldn't behave and how you should behave. So that to me has built that knowledge and the relationship I have with the Creator, and that's how I view Him. And And to me, that's invaluable. It's totally invaluable. Matter of fact, I can't imagine now going back and not being a Sunday school teacher.
Wow.
I'm wondering, even if had I not, could I have made it as far along as I have in the stock market and stayed involved? Could I have done it? I question that at times, and I tend to think the answer is, boy, it'd been really hard. If I did survive it, it would have been tough.
Yeah. See that? Never say never.
Never say never.
Never say never, I think is the lesson there. And I love that, you kept that letter there. I think that's really important. I think keeping those letters, because you're going to have bad days. I'm sure there are bad days out there that you're like, what am I doing with my life right now? And so if you can pull out that 2-page letter and read it and then know that you made an impact on somebody that was profound, then that just gives you the fuel and the energy to keep going, to power through that and then get to, the next whatever goal that you might have. So I think that's a really good thing for you to do. To all of our listeners out there, keep those letters that you get from, satisfied customers, from students, from other people that you're working with, because you never know when the times are tough. You want to be able to read that, recharge, and then get to the next goal. So
absolutely, yeah, 100% agree with you on that, Michael. Yeah.
Very good stuff. All right. So we do love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I think that's my weakness. So the next time I'm in Cambridge, Ohio, where should I go for a great meal?
Well, if I had to pick, there's 3 places. If I was going to sit down, I'd go to the Forum or Theo's or the Bear's Den, probably one of those 3. But here's the one you can't miss. Michael, now it's not a place to go eat, but I'm telling you, you cannot miss this in Cambridge. Matter of fact, the president, George Bush, stopped by Cambridge just to go here. It's not a place if you could go and eat. If you do, you're going to come out of there, bad shape. I can tell you that. But it's Kennedy's Bakery. They have the best donuts you will ever eat in your life. Best donuts you will best glazed donut. That plain old glazed donut is a killer. Michael, I'm telling you. You can't miss Kennedy's Bakery if you come to Cambridge.
All right, Kennedy's Bakery it is. I'm going to have to give that a shot next time I'm in town, because I do like a good donut. I mean, you can't have too much of that, right? Just a little bit, just a little taste. But that's great that you have a local place that you can go for some great donuts. I think that's excellent. I definitely will try it out. I'll let you know what I think next time I'm in town.
If you're here, you let me know. I'll meet you. How's that?
All right. That sounds like a plan. That sounds like a great plan. All right. So if our listeners, if they want to download your book or they want to contact you, maybe they have questions about the Triple Tank Powerhouse, where should they go to connect with you?
Yeah, 2 ways I'd say, Mike. They go to rontank.com. If they put a /book after that, it'll take them right to the page. Or they can just go to rontank.com and click on the book page at the top. They can download the book for free if they want to. Ooh, I don't know how long I'll keep that free book out there, but it is there. So if somebody wants to go get it, I'd encourage them to do it. The other way is they could email me at mosesofwallstreet@rontank.com. So if they want to email, I'm always open to emails.
All right, that's great advice there. Go and get his free book now before he decides to start charging people for it. Go to rontank.com and go and download his book. It's got a lot of great information there about the Triple Tank Powerhouse, so you can learn what that is and really understand everything about his system and some of those guardrails that we talked about earlier. I think all of that is really, really great stuff, and he's just giving it away for free. So you might as well go and read it and see what you think. But Ron, thank you so much for just shedding some light on what can be just a very intimidating area of life in terms of stocks and Wall Street. You made it seem easy, so I appreciate you.
Again, I enjoyed it. Always enjoy talking market and Bible. That's my wheelhouse.
Fantastic. Very good. So to our listeners, if you enjoyed this talk with Ron, make sure that you like it, make sure that you share it on social media, and we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and we're going to see you next time.